A forgotten plate held the clue every suspect feared. Welcome to Clue Law. I am your host, Vale. Comment where you're listening from. Hearing from you makes this journey worth it. Here we go. If you've ever watched Fritz Brenner measure basil leaves the way a jeweler weighs emeralds, you'd think the man had a private treaty with perfection. It was 9:15 on a Tuesday, and I was in the kitchen doorway, leaning a shoulder against the jamb, enjoying the spectacle. Fritz's shoulders were squared in that solemn European way of his knife making thin green confetti on the cutting board. Every slice was a quiet rebuke to the rest of humanity's sloppiness. I was thinking, not for the first time, that there are worse jobs than being Nero Wolfe's legs and voice, an occasional social alibi. You get routine, you get Fritz, and you get a boss who likes his world boxed and labeled. The brownstone was an aquarium Wolfe had designed for himself. Temperature-controlled, light filtered through the same windows for 30 years, and not a fish in it without his consent. Which is why, when the doorbell rang at 9:16, Fritz's knife paused in midair. We both listened. The bell had Wolfe's personal contempt in it, even when it was silent. Fritz darted me a look that said, in 3 languages and a frown, that this was not a correct time for bells. Wolfe was upstairs in the plant rooms, polishing orchids with a soft cloth and a harder temper. At 9:30, he would descend in his customary gravity and take breakfast at precisely 9:45, sitting in his special chair in the dining room like a king who had never learned the art of itinerancy. I pushed away from the jam and said, "I'll get it." Fritz nodded, relieved. Anything that kept strangers from the kitchen was a civic virtue. I went through the hall, past the office door with its glass panel and tidy blinds, and opened the front door far enough to see who was banging on our sanctity. I was ready with my usual line about Wolfe not being available before 11, unless the city was on fire. What I got was a woman in a slate-grey coat, too thin for early March, with a veil of rain on her shoulders, though it wasn't raining. She wasn't young, but she had that kind of face that refuses to be filed away. Not pretty in the department store sense. More like a portrait you might find in a museum you hadn't planned to enter, and then you stand there longer than you meant to. Her hands were bare. That registered first because the air had a bite to it, and any New Yorker with sense wore gloves. Her hands were also steady, which is rare on our front stoop before 10 a.m. "Mr. Goodwin?" she asked. It's always a small shock to hear your name from a stranger in that half-public place, like someone reaching inside your pocket to find your wallet without asking. I kept my face neutral. "That depends," I told her. "If you're selling encyclopedias, I'm Mr. Rockefeller." She let the corner of her mouth lift. Not a smile, more like a truce. "I'm not selling anything. I need Mr. Wolfe. He's not taking business until I know his hours." She said it like someone who had memorized them the way you memorize a code. "I also know he sometimes makes exceptions. Please tell him that Lila Arden is here." The name didn't rung any bell in my own head, which is a habit I cultivate. But I could tell from her tone she expected it to ring in Wolfe's. Her eyes were a hard green-gray, hard enough to cut you and sensible enough to regret it later. She wasn't pleading. She was stating a requirement, the way you tell a taxi driver where to go. Before I could decide whether to shut the door or offer a chair on the stoop, I heard the faint, commanding voice from the stairs. "Archie." That one syllable is a Swiss Army knife. It can mean, "Come here, go away, stop that," or "Why are you letting civilization seep into my house?" I turned. Wolfe was at the top of the first flight, a bulk in yellow pajamas and a siren-red dressing gown, one hand on the banister like it owed him money. He hadn't come down from the plant rooms. That meant he'd heard the bell and taken it as a personal insult. "Good morning," I called up. "We have a caller who knows your hours, your exceptions, and my surname." Wolfe's heavy-lidded eyes shifted past me to the woman. He stared at her for a beat that got longer than politeness would allow, but not longer than Wolfe's curiosity. "Miss Arden," he said. Her chin dipped once. Not submissive. Acknowledge only. Wolfe sighed as if fate were a cigar with a damp end. Bring her to the office. Fritz will postpone breakfast. He turned without waiting for agreement, and the robe swung behind him like a naval flag. I stepped aside. Come in, Miss Arden. The aquarium is open for visiting hours. She walked past me into the hall with a kind of quiet control that made you look twice. No nervous glancing at the portraits or the tiger skin rug or the polished wood. She moved as if she'd been in the brownstone before. I closed the door and led her to the office. It was still morning in there, which meant the blinds were half open and the sunlight drew neat bars on Wolfe's desk like a tasteful jail. I gestured to the red leather chair for clients. Have a seat. He'll be down in a minute, unless he decides to interrogate you from the stairwell. She sat. She didn't cross her legs. Another detail that sits in my brain now with a little label on it. Women who cross their legs quickly are either comfortable or performing comfort. Women who don't are usually here for business that won't fit neatly into a handbag. I took my chair at my desk and flipped open my notebook, more for show than because I expected her to start pouring without prompting. So, Lila Arden. Something tells me you didn't ring our bell early just to admire Fritz's knife. Work. I rang early because I need privacy, she said, and because if I waited until 11 I might not come at all. Why's that? Fear of our hospitality? Her eyes came to mine and stayed there. Fear of what I'm asking. I've heard that line before. It usually means a husband in the wrong bed or a brother in the wrong business, and sometimes it means something uglier. I was about to give her my standard Goodwin encouragement, something brisk and a little mocking to keep the temperature right, when Wolfe entered. He came in with the measured tread of a monument that had learned to walk. He wore the yellow pajamas, the dressing gown now tied with a rope belt, and slippers that had carried him through more moral swamps than any man alive. He went to his chair behind the desk, lowered himself into it, and adjusted his bulk as if settling the world into a proper orbit. He didn't look at me. He looked at her as if she were a specimen pinned to velvet. Miss Arden, he said again, this is unexpected. I apologize for the hour. I do not refer to the hour. Wolfe's voice was a calm baritone with a hook inside it. You have not been in this house since your orchids bloomed white in November 2 years ago. Wolfe blinked once, slow. That was more reaction than I usually got before coffee. I sat very still. So she had been here. Recently enough to remember the color of orchids in November. That put her in a short list. A client, a dinner guest, or an enemy who'd slipped past the front door. Probably not the third, because Wolfe's enemies rarely get tea. You may proceed, Wolfe said. She took a breath, the only sign she was human. I'm asking you to do something that may not be a case at all, she began. Or it may be the only case that matters. I don't know which. Wolfe raised a hand, no higher than chest level, and delicately interrupted. You are not required to preface your problem with philosophical uncertainty. State it. She nodded. She was used to being directed, or she'd learned fast. A man came to my house last night. He said he needed shelter for a few days. He was afraid. He wouldn't tell me from whom. I told him I couldn't keep a stranger. He said I owed him. Owed him what? Wolfe asked. My life, she said plainly. It's true. 9 years ago in Cairo, my car burned after an accident. I would have died. He pulled me out. I never saw him again. I didn't even know his name. Last night he appeared on my doorstep and said I owed him. She wasn't theatrical about it. No quiver in the voice, no reaching for a handkerchief. It came out flat, as if she were reporting a business transaction with grim margins. Wolfe's eyes narrowed slightly, which on him is like a lighthouse turning a degree. And you admitted him? Yes. Why? Because I did owe him. She said it like a sober fact. That's the Simplest part? The complicated part is what happened after. Wolfe waited. He can outwait glaciers. He stayed in my guest room, she said. I gave him food. I asked him for a name. He told me none. I asked him what he was running from. He said I didn't want to know. I asked him why he came to me instead of a hotel. He said a hotel can be searched. A hotel can be searched, Wolfe repeated quietly, tasting the phrase. Continue. At midnight, I heard him moving around and downstairs. I went down. He was in my study. He was rifling a drawer I keep locked. He didn't hear me. I said his name, whatever it was, and he turned and apologized. He put the papers back. He said he was looking for something that belonged to him. She paused. For the first time, her composure snagged. He said he wouldn't leave without it. And I don't know what he wanted. That drawer contains old letters, legal documents, a few photographs. Not his, as far as I know. He wouldn't explain. He only insisted I had it, or my father had it. Wolfe's eyebrows lifted a fraction at the mention of her father. Your father is deceased, is he not? Yes, for 3 years. Your father was Ambrose Arden. Yes. That name did ring a bell. Ambrose Arden was one of those men reporters call industrialists because operator sounds too honest. Shipping, metals, some real estate, and a taste for keeping his hands clean while other people got theirs dirty. I'd read the obituaries and the occasional scandal. Wolfe leaned back a millimeter, which is his version of rising to his feet. I recall meeting Mr. Arden socially on 2 occasions. He was not a man who inspired filial tenderness. He inspired obligations. Her tone got thinner. And enemies. So it seems. Wolfe's voice was still calm, but the air had turned attentive. Last night, after the intruder in your drawer, what occurred? He went back to his room at 2 a.m. I heard a sound like a chair falling. I went to the hallway. His door was open. He was on the floor. Dead? She nodded once. It looked like it cost her something. I called my doctor. He said the man had been dead at least 30 minutes. There were no marks. No blood. No sign of a struggle. Did you summon the police? No. She said it quickly, with enough finality to make my pen stop. Not yet. Wolfe's eyes flicked to mine and back. Why not? Because I'm not sure he was killed, she said. And I'm not sure what he came for. If I call the police now, they will take my house apart, my father's papers, my life. If I don't call them, I'm hiding a corpse. I agree with your summary of the alternatives, Wolfe said dryly. Where is the body now? In my guest room, on the bed. I covered him. I locked the door. The doctor left by a side entrance. I exhaled silently through my nose. Guests who don't leave alive are bad enough. Guests who don't leave at all are worse. Also, side entrances and private doctors at 2 a.m. are about as far from legal hygiene as you can get without using bleach. Wolfe steepled his fingers at his stomach. Miss Arden, you bring me a dead man who is not here, a potential crime that you are not certain is a crime, and a request you have not yet stated. I presume you want me to determine what happened and what should be done. Is that correct? Yes. That is 2 requests. Then I'm making 2. Wolfe studied her. I could see the gears turning under the soft flesh, like a submarine under calm water. The brownstone was already disturbed. I could feel the ripple. Wolfe does not like being asked to validate someone's decision to avoid the police. But he likes puzzles, and he likes being owed things even more. Tell me, Wolfe said, did the man leave any identifying property? A wallet, keys, luggage, a note? Nothing, not even a coat. He came with a small bag. It's in the room still. I didn't open it. Did your doctor offer an opinion on the cause of death? Heart failure, maybe poison. He couldn't tell without an autopsy. Wolfe grunted. That sound can mean a dozen things. Here I thought it meant, yes, the world still contains idiots who die inconveniently. Miss Arden, Wolfe said, and there was a subtle shift in the line of his voice, the way a chess player touches a rook before moving it. "What is your immediate danger?" "My immediate danger is that a man died in my house." She didn't flinch. "My deeper danger is that he came for something tied to my father. If he was running from someone, they may come to me next. If he died naturally, I still have to learn why he came and what he wanted. Either way, I cannot afford public noise." "Not yet." "Why?" "Because my father's estate is being contested again." Now there was the hitch, the human one. "A hearing is in 2 weeks. If scandal erupts now, I lose everything he left me, and I won't let that happen. Not for him." Her mouth tightened, and it wasn't pretty. It was honest. "Not for anyone." Wolfe's lids dropped halfway. He was displeased, which to him is almost a virtue. "You ask me to avoid public notice in a matter involving a corpse. That is an unpleasant request." "I'm not asking you to conceal murder," she said. "I'm asking you to find truth quickly before we involve people who don't care about truth." Wolfe looked at her a long time. She met it. Somewhere upstairs, Fritz was probably muttering to himself about breakfast's mortality. In my head, I was already doing the quick arithmetic of what kind of morning this was going to turn into. Finally, Wolfe said, "If the man is dead in your house, the police must be notified. That is not a matter for negotiation." She didn't argue. She only said quietly, "Then I'm asking you to come with me before I call them. I want your eyes on my study, your sense of what he was looking for, your judgment about whether there may be danger in waiting even an hour. I don't know who he was, but you may." This was where I expected Wolfe to do one of two things. Refuse, because leaving the brownstone before 11 violates cosmic law, or accept because someone had dangled a question in front of him with a sharp enough hook. He surprised me by not answering immediately. He turned his head a fraction toward me. "Archie," he said, "you will accompany Miss Arden to her home at once. You will inspect the premises, secure whatever may be relevant, and report to me promptly. You will not notify the police unless you judge immediate peril. You will, however, do nothing to compromise evidence. Is that clear?" It was clear. It was also the kind of instruction that shows Wolfe had already decided to take the case before he told her. That happens when something in his head clicks into place with a noise only he can hear. "Yes, sir." He returned his attention to her. "Miss Arden, I do not yet agree to serve you. I agree to acquire information. If after I have it I choose to proceed, we will set terms. Meanwhile, you will return home with Mr. Goodwin and await his report. You will not touch anything further. You will, if possible, remain unobtrusive." She rose. "Thank you," she said, and this time the words weren't just polite, they were heavy. Wolfe lifted a hand in dismissal the way a pope absolves a crowd. "Go." I stood up, slid my notebook into my pocket, and picked up my hat from the stand. I could feel the brownstone's routines shifting, like a well-balanced ship rocking the wrong way. At the door, she paused and looked back toward Wolfe. "Mr. Wolfe?" "Yes?" "If you decline after you've seen, after Mr. Goodwin reports, I'll understand. But I want you to know one thing." Wolfe waited. "The man who died in my guest room," she said evenly, "looked at me last night and said, 'They think you don't remember, but your father remembered for you, and now you're the only one who can unlock it.'" For the first time, Wolfe's eyes sharpened in a way you could feel from across the room. "Unlock what?" he asked. "I don't know." She held his gaze. "That's why I came." She went out into the hall. I opened the front door for her, and as we stepped into the cold March air, I had the strong hunch that breakfast in the brownstone was going to be postponed longer than Fritz liked, and that the guest who never left alive was about to invite a lot of company. Lila Arden's house was one of those East 70s town places that look as if they were built to make sure the street stayed out. 3 steps up, black paint on the railings, a brass knocker that had never known a finger without a ring. The taxi ride over was short enough for me to rehearse 5 possible versions of what I'd find, and long enough to decide all 5 would be wrong. She used a key. No maid opening the door, no butler hovering. That told me something else about her besides money. Inside, the air had that chilled, shut-up smell houses get when grief and lawyers have been through them too often. It was warm enough, but the warmth didn't feel lived in. Her place was quiet in the way a library is quiet right before somebody learns the book they want is missing. "I've told no one you're here," she said, as she took off the grey coat and hung it on a carved oak rack that probably cost more than my last car. "Except my doctor, and he won't speak." "Doctors say that a lot," I told her. "What they mean is they won't speak unless they have to." She didn't smile. She led the way down a narrow corridor to the back, and I followed with my eyes working overtime. Oriental rug, oil landscape of something pastoral and dead, a little side table with a crystal dish that was empty. No flowers. If Wolfe were here, he would have noted the absence like a missing tooth. The study was at the rear. French doors, drawn drapes, a desk that looked like it had been ordered from an 18th century catalogue and never used for anything more vulgar than signing checks. The room had a faint tang of tobacco that didn't match her. It also had the kind of neatness that makes you suspect somebody spent a night doing emergency housekeeping. The drawer was there. She pointed to a cabinet beside the desk. It was a solid walnut thing with 3 drawers. The top one had a brass keyhole. I didn't touch it. "You lock it with a key." "Yes. The key is on my ring. I didn't open it after I saw him." In the center of the Persian rug was a low chair with its back turned slightly as if someone had shoved it away from the desk and then thought better of making it straight again. I crouched to look at the rug. No obvious scuffs, no spilled ink, no cigarette ash. I leaned closer to the chair legs. One had a nick on the underside, fresh enough to show pale wood through the polish. "Was this chair here when you came down at midnight?" I asked. "It was pulled up to the desk. When I saw him, I stood in the doorway. He turned and rose. The chair tipped. He set it right and apologized." "Set it right, huh?" "He failed." She watched me without blinking. "Does that matter?" "Maybe. Wolfe wants everything to matter." I walked to the cabinet and looked at the keyhole. No scratch marks. If someone had picked it, he'd been tidy. The desk drawers were all shut. I checked the blotter and the pen set. Nothing moved there. I bent to the wastebasket. It was empty. That's not normal for a study someone uses every day, unless she had a janitor's soul or someone had emptied it last night. "You didn't sweep up?" I asked. "No, but I did." She stopped. "Go on." I picked up a torn scrap of paper from the rug near the cabinet. I didn't know what it was. I put it on the desk. She nodded toward a corner by the lamp. There it was. A small triangle of cream stationery, edges ragged like it had been wrenched apart rather than neatly torn. I used a pencil to lift it. On it was a typed fragment of a sentence. "Cancelled if you speak to Wolfe. They will know." Nothing else. No letterhead. No handwriting. The typeface was old-fashioned, like something from Emmanuel Underwood. The kind of thing firms still use when they want to look dignified or when the secretary refuses to update her habits. "Where did this come from?" I asked. "I don't know. It wasn't there before he came." I didn't write it. I set it back exactly where it had been. "Okay, that's our first present." She breathed in slowly as if holding steady. "You think he was threatened?" "Either that or he thought he was." "Let's see the drawer." She handed me her key ring without hesitation. I opened the top drawer. Inside were file folders laid in a tidy row, envelopes and a few photos in a leather sleeve. Nothing was scattered. If the man had ransacked it, he'd done it like a librarian. "What's in these folders?" "Correspondence of my father's. Legal papers, The estate documents, some personal letters. I pulled the folders out one by one, not reading, just checking for gaps, disturbed edges, anything that looked recently handled. 2 folders were slightly misaligned with the rest, their tabs showing a millimeter higher. I opened one. It held carbon copies of letters, dated across the last decade of Ambrose Arden's life. The other held clippings, mostly financial pages. In between them, in the drawer bottom, lay an empty space that was too clean to be a coincidence. Dust outlines are boredom-proof. Something flat and letter-sized had been there, maybe in a sleeve, maybe loose. I looked up at her. "Did you remove anything from here in the past week?" "No." "Past month?" "No." "Then either your guest took something," I said, "or he moved it and decided to come back for it later and died before he could." Her jaw tightened. "He didn't leave the study with anything." "People leave studies with things all the time. Some of them don't notice themselves doing it." Her eyes flashed. "Are you suggesting I took it?" "I'm suggesting we don't eliminate possibilities because they offend our manners." I restacked the folders in the same order. "Now, take me to the guest room. Let's meet the man who used your hospitality as a turnstile." She didn't answer my last line, which was probably wise, and led me upstairs. The staircase was carpeted runner red, muffling our steps. Halfway up, I noticed a faint scrape on the wall near the banister, fresh, like a suitcase corner had kissed it. The kind of detail you file away in your head with a question mark, because the universe is stingy with explanations until Wolfe asks. The guest room was at the end of the corridor on the 2nd floor. She stopped before it like a person pausing at a grave they're not sure they're allowed to visit. Her key clicked in the lock, and she pushed the door open with a measured care, as if the air inside might bite. It didn't. It was still heavy and smelled faintly of cologne layered over something medicinal. Curtains drawn, bed lamp off. The bed was a wide mahogany job with a quilt that could have been in service during the Spanish-American War. On top of it lay the man. He was on his back, hands folded low on his stomach as if someone had arranged him for a viewing. But there was no reverence in the placement. It was just tidy. His face was turned slightly toward the window, eyes closed, mouth half open like he'd been about to say something mild and got cut off mid-syllable. Late 40s, maybe early 50s. Good bones under a weak stubble, hair dark with a line of gray at the temples. The kind of man who once had a profession that demanded clean cuffs and later found clean cuffs inconvenient. I didn't touch him. That's one thing Wolfe drilled into me early, and the other was to never learn to love a client's story too much. I stood at the foot of the bed and let my eyes do the work. No blood, no bruise on the throat, no swelling around the lips, fingernails clean, no torn cuticles. The knuckles showed no fresh abrasion. If he'd fought like a saint or a ghost. His suit was rumpled as if he'd slept in it, not the flannel grey kind a banker buys, but a dark, travel-worn number with a bit of city grit at the cuffs. His shoes were off, placed side by side on the floor like he'd been staying more than a night. At the far wall sat a small leather bag, unremarkable and zipped. "You said you didn't open it," I murmured. "I didn't," she said. Her voice was steady, but it came from farther away than her body. I walked over and crouched beside the bag. I didn't open it. Not yet. I looked around first. Nightstand. A glass of water half full, no pills beside it. Wastebasket. Empty again. Dresser top. Cleared. Closet door slightly ajar. I nudged it open with a toe. Inside were his coat and hat hanging on the rod. So he had a coat after all. He'd come in wearing it and taken it off up here. The coat pocket bulged faintly. That was permission enough. I slid a hand in carefully and pulled out a folded newspaper, yesterday's Times, the kind of thing you use to look normal. Nothing tucked inside it. I felt deeper and found a smaller item, an old-style key on a plain ring. No tag, no number, but the teeth were distinctive, as if cut for a heavy lock. I noted it and put it back where I found it, Evidence likes to be left unoffended. I turned to the bed again. Your doctor check his pockets? He said he didn't. Good. I leaned closer without touching. There was a faint discoloration at the corner of his left cuff, a rusty brown. Not blood. More like old, ink, or maybe something chemical. His right sleeve had a tiny tear near the elbow, frayed like he'd brushed against a rough edge. The tear was recent. Threads were clean, not matted. I straightened. Did you hear him fall? Yes, like a chair tipping. But I didn't hear a voice afterward. No gasp. Nothing. Door locked? No. Open. Window. She nodded toward it. Closed when I came in. I went to it and checked the latch. It was locked. I looked at the sill. No moisture, no grit, no obvious sign a human had been through it. Not impossible. Just unfriendly. I let my gaze travel the room again. The lampshade was slightly askew, maybe bumped. The rug beside the bed had a wrinkle, shallow like a toe had hooked it in a hurry. The desk chair in the study had tipped the same way. Pattern, maybe. All right, I said. Let's open the bag. She didn't move, so I did. I unzipped it and spread it open on the floor. Inside were 3 things. A toothbrush in a paper sleeve, a clean shirt rolled tight, and a brown envelope with no writing. That was it. No wallet, no passport, no shaving kit, no spare socks. A man traveling light, or a man traveling scared. I slid the envelope out and opened it. Empty. Not even a stray fiber. I sat back on my heels. So either he packed like a monk, or somebody emptied his bag before he died. Her eyes lifted to mine. Somebody besides me. Yeah, I said lightly. We'll keep you on the charity list for now. She didn't take it as a joke. She was staring past me at the man on the bed. Her face had that controlled, exhausted look people get when their lives have been rearranged by someone else's decision. I'd seen it on widows and on CEOs and on kids who just realized their parents had feet of clay. It's the look that says, I'm not sure what I'm allowed to believe anymore. Miss Arden, I said, soft enough to not make a sound in the room. What did he call you? By name? Yes, Lila. Like he'd earned it. Did he say anything else about your father? Any specific object, a place, a person? No specifics, only that my father remembered for me. I didn't understand it then. I don't now. I nodded. Who besides you knew he was in the house? No one. I live alone. The staff comes in the morning and leaves by 6. I dismissed them early yesterday. Any neighbors close enough to see him come in? Possible, but they mind their business. New York has never had that hobby, I said. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going downstairs to call Mr. Wolfe. Then I'm going to recommend you call the police within the hour. If you refuse, Wolfe may refuse too, and then you'll have a guest you'll need to explain to a judge. Her lips pressed into a line, but she nodded. Call him. I left her there with the dead man and went downstairs to the study, shutting the door behind me softly. I took out my phone and dialed the brownstone. Fritz answered, breathless, as if he'd been sprinting in place. Archie. Put him on. A clunk, a murmur, and then Wolfe's voice, already impatient. Report. Male, late 40s to early 50s. No visible trauma. Bag packed light as a feather, an empty envelope. Top drawer in her study shows a clean outline where something flat was removed. She claims she didn't touch it. There's a scrap of typed paper warning him not to speak to you. Also, he had a coat and hat in the closet. Coat pocket holds a plain key on a ring, heavy lock style. Nothing else identifying. There was a pause long enough for him to taste each detail. The scrap of paper. Read it to me precisely. I did. Another pause. Then, do not advise her further about the police. I will. You will remain there. Search the house for any other disturbance. Then find who that man was. Start with the doctor. I want his name, his arrival time, his exact observations. Is that clear? Crystal. Good. And Archie... His voice lowered a half step. Subtle emphasis. Be alert. A man who brings a warning about me and dies in a client's house is seldom alone in his enterprise. I was born alert, I told him, but I'll polish it. He hung up. I slipped the phone away and stood there for a second in the Arden study, listening to the quiet. The house felt like it was holding its breath, and I had the uncomfortable sense we were about to learn why. I went to the hall phone to call the doctor, and as my finger hovered over the buttons, the front doorbell rang. The bell was a neat, single chime, none of that thumb-on-the-button desperation. That alone makes you put your hand a little closer to your pocket. I didn't move at once. In Wolfe's world, a bell is never just a bell, and I've been in his world long enough to catch the habit. I went to the front parlor with my footsteps moderate and my ears wide. Through the beveled glass of the vestibule, I saw a man in a dark overcoat, hat in hand. He was tall, thin, and had the kind of pale, patient face you see on men who've learned to wait for other people's bad decisions. He stood slightly to one side, not crowding the door, like somebody who knows the choreography of decent houses. I opened the inner door, then the outer. Yes? He gave me a polite nod. Good morning. Is Miss Arden at home? That depends who's asking. Saul Panzer. Now there's a name to make you blink. Saul Panzer is Wolfe's favorite freelance bloodhound. If Wolfe had already called him, it meant Wolfe had already decided the game was real, not rehearsal. I stepped aside. Come in, Saul. I was just about to ring you in my mind. You know Lila Arden? Socially. He hung his coat on the rack with the easy ownership of a man who has been invited into stranger houses by worse circumstances. I got a call 10 minutes ago. Mr. Wolfe said, you'd be here. I'm flattered he trusts my location that much. Miss Arden is upstairs with a situation. Come in the study, and I'll bring you speed. We went to the rear study. Saul didn't look around much. He has a way of filing a room without making a show of it. I gave him the quick version. Dead guest, missing flat item from a drawer, typed warning scrap, empty envelope, heavy lock, key in coat pocket, no ID. He listened, eyes half-lidded, like he was already weighing which threads were worth pulling first. When I finished, he said, any idea who the dead man is? Not yet. I was about to call her doctor when you rang. Doctor first, then me, Saul said mildly. If there's poison involved, we want the physician's words while they're still fresh. I like that. I liked almost everything about Saul, except his tendency to be right before you are. I dialed. She'd given me the number earlier, and the guy answered on the second ring. Dr. Kingsley. Doctor, this is Archie Goodwin. I'm with Nero Wolfe. I'm at Miss Arden's house. We need to speak to you about last night. A pause. Not fear. More like a man shifting into a coat he doesn't love. Is Miss Arden all right? She's upright. The guest isn't. I need your exact timeline. He exhaled. I received her call at 2:03 a.m. I arrived at 2:25. I was shown to the guest room. The man was on the floor beside the bed. He was cool, no pulse, pupils fixed, no bruising, no froth at the mouth. I estimated death between 1:30 and 1:45. I advised notifying the police. Did you examine the body closely? As closely as one can without instruments. I lifted his eyelids, checked for cyanosis, listened to the chest out of habit. I found a faint odor, bitter almonds. Slight. It could have been cologne, but it struck me. Bitter almonds, I repeated. Yes, I am not a toxicologist, Mr. Goodwin, but I have smelled cyanide once before in the war. The odor was similar. Did you see anything else? Any medication? Any drink? A glass of water on the nightstand. I did not taste it, if that's your question. I saw no pills. Did he have anything on him? Wallet, papers? I did not search him. Miss Arden told me he was a stranger and asked me not to disturb anything. Did you notice his hands? Any stains? His left cuff had a brownish smear, like iodine perhaps, or ink. It did not look like blood. All right, one more thing. In your opinion, could this be natural? Yes, he said after a second. A myocardial infarction without outward signs is possible. But the odor, if that was cyanide, it is not natural. Thanks, doctor. Don't discuss this with anyone except police if they call you. Mr. Wolfe may contact you. I hung up and looked at Saul. He smelled almonds. Saul's eyebrows went up a millimeter. That shifts the weight. Yeah, cyanide likes to make a dramatic exit, but no froth, no obvious color change. Either the doc's nose is romantic, or we're dealing with a dose that was neat. Saul nodded slowly. We need a name for the body. Everything else hangs off that. Wolfe said the same. You got any traction yet? I came straight here, he said, but I've got a couple of lines ready. First, his face. If I see him, I can start a memory sweep. Second, the key. If it's for a locker, a safe deposit box, or an industrial lock, we can maybe trace which manufacturers cut that pattern. Let's do face first. I jerked my head toward the stairs. You want to meet him? Saul doesn't like surprises, but he likes work more. We went up. Lila Arden was still in the hallway outside the guest room, her arms folded tight as if holding herself together by pressure. Miss Arden, I said, this is Saul Panzer. He works for Mr. Wolfe. Her eyes widened a fraction, then she nodded. Of course. Hello. Morning, Saul said gently. I'm sorry for the trouble. She gave him a look that said trouble had already moved in and wasn't paying rent. She unlocked the door and stepped back. Saul entered first. He went to the bed without haste, studied the man's face for a full 10 seconds, then leaned closer, still not touching. I know him, he said finally. That sentence in a room like that is like a match struck in a vault. From where? I asked. Saul kept his eyes on the dead man. Not personally, in passing. He used another name, but I've seen this face on photographs tied to litigation. He straightened and looked at Lila. Miss Arden, did he call himself anything at all to you, even a first name? She shook her head. Nothing, only that I owed him. Saul's mouth tightened, thinking. If I'm right, his real name is Simon Varon. The name hit the air with a thud. Lila's eyes flicked, not to Saul, but to the man on the bed, as if the label made him heavier. Varon, she whispered. No, that can't be. What is it? I said. She swallowed once. Simon Varon was my father's attorney. Not in the last years, before that. He vanished 8 years ago. People said he stole something. People said my father ruined him. Saul nodded. Exactly. Disbarment proceedings, then disappearance. If he's Varon, he didn't just come for shelter, he came for leverage. I felt the pieces shift again, like a chessboard after a hidden move. I looked at Lila. Your father's attorney comes back from the dead to die in your guest room with a warning not to speak to Wolfe and a missing document from your drawer. That ring any bells besides ours? She stared at the body, and when she spoke, her voice was low and careful. My father kept a private file. He called it his insurance. Only he knew where it was. Varon once fought with him about it. I heard them. Varon said it could. Destroy people. My father said that was the point. Insurance file, I said. Flat, letter-sized. Maybe the outline in your drawer. Her chin dipped slowly. If my father hid it among my papers. Then Varon found it, or found part of it, and someone made sure he didn't walk out with it. I turned to Saul. You thinking what I'm thinking? That if Varon is here, the people he could destroy are already moving, Saul said. Downstairs, a slow, deliberate knocking started at the front door. 3 firm raps, not the bell. the kind of knock that expects to be answered. I felt the hair at the back of my neck wake up. "Stay here," I told Lila. "To Saul? With me." We went down together, and before I reached the vestibule, I already knew the day had just found its next development. I got to the door first because that's my job description in Wolfe's universe, and opened it far enough to control the conversation. On the stoop stood a man in a charcoal suit with a camel hair overcoat draped like an afterthought. Mid-40s, maybe, with a clean shave and a clean conscience only if he'd left it at home. He held a leather portfolio under one arm. Beside him, half a step back, was a woman in a navy coat whose eyes went everywhere but my face. The man gave me a practiced smile. "Mr. Goodwin?" "That depends," I said. "If you're from the gas company, we don't have gas." He didn't blink. "I'm Howard Reeve. This is Miss Colby. We're here to see Miss Arden." Saul was at my shoulder, silent as a coat rack. I kept my body in the doorway. "Miss Arden isn't receiving callers this morning." Reeve's smile tightened, showing a hint of teeth. "I'm afraid we must speak with her. It's urgent." Urgent like a fire, or urgent like a man who brings trouble in his portfolio? His eyes flicked past me into the hall, measuring how hard it would be to step around. "Mr. Goodwin, I represent the estate of Ambrose Arden in its current proceedings. Miss Arden and I have a 10 o'clock meeting." 10 o'clock got rescheduled by a corpse, I told him. "Try again tomorrow." Miss Colby moved her gaze to Saul, then back to me. Her face was pretty in a brittle way, and her mouth had that thin line that means she's used to taking notes rather than giving opinions. Reeve's voice stayed polite, but his patience drained out. "If you're her visitor, you should understand that these proceedings are sensitive. Miss Arden has an obligation to survive the morning, yes." I opened the door another inch, enough to change the power line, but not enough to invite anyone in. "What's the agenda for your 10 o'clock? He hesitated half a beat. A lawyer's hesitation is like a dog's growl. It tells you where the bone is. "We received word last night that certain documents may have resurfaced. Documents belonging to Mr. Arden. We need to know whether Miss Arden has them." "Resurfaced from where?" I asked. Reeve's nostrils flared and the woman's eyes flicked to his jaw. "From a source I'm not at liberty to disclose to you." "Try disclosing it to me anyway," I said. "I'm a liberty-loving guy." He ignored that. "Mr. Goodwin, are you refusing us entry on Miss Arden's behalf or on your own?" "On the behalf of physics. The house is full." Saul cleared his throat. He didn't step forward, but his presence moved into the conversation like a slow tide. "Mr. Reeve, I'm Saul Panzer. We're acting for Nero Wolfe at present. If you have business with Miss Arden, you may state it to us." Reeve's eyes sharpened. "Nero Wolfe?" "Same one," I said. "Bigger than he looks in print." He studied Saul, then me, recalculating. He was smart enough to realize a sudden Wolfe involvement changes the weather. "This is irregular. Miss Arden did not inform me of Wolfe's participation." "She didn't inform you of several things," I said, and then regretted it because it gave him an opening smell. His head tilted. "Several things?" "Like my ability to count," I said smoothly. "What documents are you chasing, Reeve?" He leaned in a fraction, lowering his voice, which is always a sign a man wants you to do something stupid in confidence. "There is a sealed memorandum Ambrose Arden prepared in 2017. It contains accusations against multiple individuals connected to his businesses. It was never filed, never disclosed. It disappeared from his attorney's custody 8 years ago. If it exists, and if it surfaces now, it will destabilize the hearing." I kept my face blank. Saul didn't move at all. "Attorney's custody?" Saul said softly. "You mean Simon Varin?" Reeve's eyes widened just enough to show he hadn't expected us to know the name already. "Yes. Varin was Arden's counsel for certain arrangements. He fled before disciplinary action. We have reason to believe he returned to New York." Reason like he died in this house. I didn't say it. Wolfe would have rapped my knuckles from across town. But my silence probably said enough to Saul, who was listening the way a safe listens to a drill. Reeve recovered. If Varen made contact with Miss Arden, she must tell us. She is a party to this litigation. Any concealment could be construed as obstruction. Save your threats for a jury, I said. Right now you're talking to a front door. Miss Colby spoke for the first time. Her voice was low and a little breathy. Mr. Goodwin, if there's a legal issue, we only want to help Miss Arden protect herself. Then you should go help her by not hovering on her stoop while she's trying to breathe. Reeve's smile slipped entirely. I will not leave without speaking to her. That makes two of us, I said, and started to close the door just enough to tell him the talk was over. He put out a hand, not on the door, just in the air, to stop it. Mr. Goodwin, listen carefully. There are other parties searching for that memorandum. If Miss Arden has it, she's in danger. I froze with the door half shut. You don't get a line like that for free. It comes with hooks. What parties? I asked. He held my gaze. People it implicates. One of them is not accustomed to waiting. Saul said calmly. Name. Reeve shook his head once. Not on a stoop, but I will say this. If Varen is involved, then so are men who do not mind making a second death look like a first. That image landed hard because it wasn't imagination. It was a map. I looked him over carefully and decided he was scared enough to be either honest or very good at theater. The trouble was, both types can kill you. All right, I said. You've delivered your warning. Now deliver your phone number. He blinked. What? Write it down, and your office address. If Miss Arden wants to speak to you, she will. Until then, you're leaving. He hesitated, then opened his portfolio, took out a card, and handed it over. I took it without letting my fingers touch his. Thank you, I said. Now you can go back to being irregular elsewhere. Reeve's eyes flicked past me again, but Saul's quiet bulk in the hall was a fence he didn't want to test. He gave a stiff nod, turned, and descended the steps with Miss Colby close behind, her head down like a woman already composing a memo about what she hadn't been allowed to see. I closed the door, slid the chain, and stood there for a second, listening to the city noises come back into focus. Saul spoke first. They're after the same file. Yeah, I said, and he just confirmed it existed, named the year, and tied it to Varen. That's a gift with teeth. From upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Lila Arden was coming down, drawn by the voices or by instinct. When she reached the bottom step, she looked at us. Who was that? Your father's estate lawyer, I said. Howard Reeve. He wants to know if you have a memorandum Ambrose Arden wrote in 2017. He says it disappeared from Varen. He also says people who don't like its contents are looking, and he thinks you're in danger. Her face didn't change much. Only the skin under her eyes tightened. I thought so, she said quietly. Thought what? I asked. That the guest who never left alive didn't come to me for shelter, she said. He came because he had the memorandum, or knew where it was, and because someone was already hunting him. Saul nodded once. Then we need to find where he meant to take it. That key in his coat may be our next address. I felt the day tilt forward again, like a train leaving a station you didn't expect to be on. Okay, I said. First we call Wolfe with the update. Then you don't stay in this house alone another minute. And then Saul and I go figure out what lock that key opens, before someone else opens it with a gun. By the time I got back to the brownstone that evening, I'd logged enough taxi miles to qualify as a city bus and enough human nature to qualify as tired. The front door closed behind me with that particular brownstone thump that always sounds like Fritz locking out the world with a ladle. Wolfe was in the office. Of course he was. If the house had been on fire, he would have remained in the office, explaining combustion. Saul Panzer was perched in the red leather chair for clients, looking unbothered, which on Saul means he has already arranged 3 contingencies. Lila Arden sat on the yellow chair by the corner table, hands folded in her lap the way the dead man's had been, but hers were alive and tight. Inspector Kramer stood by the globe, hat in hand, face in a granite mode. Wolfe gave me one look that asked for my report, without using any words, and then turned to Kramer. "Inspector," Wolfe said, "Mr. Goodwin has returned. We may continue." Kramer grunted. "You mean you may start. You dragged me over here after dinner and told me to bring my patients. You will find it useful," Wolfe said pleasantly. "Archie, sit. Summarize." I sat at my desk and gave the short version with just enough nouns to keep it coherent. Saul and I went to Varen's old firm on Madison. We showed the key. Receptionist recognized the pattern and got jumpy. Their records partner, Lasker, admitted they still keep a Holtby and Crane steel file room for legacy matters. Key fit. We went in with him. The cabinet is in a locked sub-room used for sealed client memoranda. I glanced at Lila, then continued. One cabinet slot was empty. A dust outline same size as the one in Lila's drawer. Lasker said that slot held Ambrose Arden's sealed memorandum. Insurance, per Arden. He claimed the memo disappeared 8 years ago when Varen vanished. He also claimed it never returned. But their internal log showed the cabinet was opened last night at 11:47 p.m. by a key, and the security guard saw a woman leaving the floor 10 minutes later. Navy coat, blonde hair, slim build. I nodded toward Kramer. Guard ID'd her from a photo as Reeves' clerk, Miss Colby. Colby wasn't there, but her name landed anyway. Kramer's eyebrows rose and then knitted. He looked at Wolfe as if asking why he wasn't already in handcuffs. Wolfe didn't blink. "Proceed." "After that," I said, "we paid Miss Colby a visit at her apartment. She wasn't home, but there was a fresh locksmith invoice taped inside her mailbox. Holtby and Crane key duplication, yesterday afternoon. Addressed to her, paid cash." I held up the photo I'd snapped. Then Saul did Saul things and found she'd been seen this morning at a baggage locker facility near Grand Central. That's where she is now, as of an hour ago, unless she's moved again. Saul added quietly. Her phone last pinged in the buildings. Lower concourse. Likely still there. Kramer puffed out air through his nose. "So your dead man got off in Arden's house, and Reeves' clerk stole a memo from a law firm file room last night and maybe hid it in a locker. Where's Reeve in this?" "Downstairs," I said, drinking Fritz's coffee like a condemned man. I jerked my thumb toward the hall. "He arrived half an hour after I did." Wolfe nodded once, which was his way of telling me the obvious had already been arranged. "Inspector," Wolfe said, "your officers are with Mr. Reeve now. He has been adequately discouraged from leaving. Miss Arden, you will listen and answer if I address you. Mr. Panzer and Mr. Goodwin will contribute as needed." Lila said nothing, but her jaw set like an anchor. Wolfe turned to Kramer again. "You, of course, have removed the body from Miss Arden's house." "Yeah." Kramer's voice made it sound like a burden he'd hauled alone. "Me says cyanide, enough to kill quick. No natural heart failure fairy tale. We'll run tox in the morning." "Good. Then we may speak clearly." Wolfe leaned back the half-inch that meant he was beginning. "The deceased, Simon Varen, returned to New York for one purpose. To retrieve Ambrose Arden's sealed memorandum. He believed Miss Arden possessed it. He was correct." Lila's head snapped up. "I didn't—" Wolfe raised a hand. "You did not know you did. Your father placed it in your locked drawer, likely during his last years, to prevent its accidental discovery by those he feared. He used you as a blind safe. Varen, having once held the memorandum, knew its significance and perhaps its location by inference. He sought shelter at your house because he expected you, alone, dutiful, and anxious about the estate hearing, to be his most controllable access point." Kramer shifted. "You saying Ambrose Arden put that thing in her drawer without telling her?" Precisely. A man who called it insurance would not file it in a mailbox. Wolfe's eyes flickered to me. Archie saw a dust outline in the drawer. That was the first physical indication of removal. Varin removed the memorandum at midnight. Lila's throat worked, but I saw him put papers back. You saw him replace decoys. Wolfe's voice stayed calm, as if he were discussing seating at dinner. He used the darkness, your shock, and your sense of obligation. He left with the memorandum concealed on his person. He intended to take it to a secure location, perhaps a baggage locker or safe deposit, then bargain with the implicated parties for protection or profit. Kramer said, and someone beat him to it. Someone who had followed him to Miss Arden's. Wolfe turned his head slightly, eyelids heavy. The scrap of typewritten warning Miss Arden found was not from Varin. It was for him. It said to cancel the attempt if he spoke to me. The author knew he might think to consult me. Only a person aware of my professional interest in Arden's affairs and Varin's return would write that. Saul murmured, Reeve. Wolfe inclined his head. Reeve, yes, but not alone. Mr. Reeve did not write the warning. He is a lawyer of regular skills and irregular nerves. The warning was typed on old stationery, with a manual font. That suggests a person who uses old machines or who wished to avoid traceable modern printing. Such caution is more typical of a subordinate acting covertly than an attorney acting openly. Kramer frowned. You're aiming at Colby. Indeed. Wolfe's gaze slid toward the door like a spotlight. Archie, invite Mr. Reeve and Miss Colby to enter. The parlor door opened before I'd gotten halfway up from my chair. It wasn't Reeve first. It was two plainclothes guys, and then Miss Colby between them, looking composed in the way a drowning person looks composed right before the water takes their mouth. Reeve followed, pale and furious, tie loosened, his portfolio clutched as if it might save him. Colby's eyes went to Lila first, then to Wolfe. She swallowed. If she felt shame, it had good manners and didn't show up without a call. Kramer said to the detectives, "Let 'em sit." They did. Colby took the chair nearest the door. Reeve remained standing until Kramer glared him down. Wolfe nodded courteously, as if this were a dinner and he were about to serve the roast. Miss Colby, you duplicated a Holtby and Crane warded key yesterday afternoon. Last night you used it to enter your firm's sealed file room and take Ambrose Arden's memorandum. This morning you hid it in a baggage locker. Am I in error? Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Reeve barked, "This is insane." "Mr. Reeve," Wolfe said without looking at him, "insanity is a medical matter. I'm addressing crime." Kramer leaned forward. "Answer him, Colby." She looked at her hands. "Yes," she said, and it was barely a word. Reeve went red, then white. What the hell, Meredith? That memo was supposed to stay buried. We only needed to know if Arden's daughter had it." Wolfe's eyes opened a fraction more. "So you admit seeking it?" Reeve's mouth worked. He realized too late he'd stepped onto a rake. "No, I mean, it's evidence in a hearing. I had a duty." "Your duty is to your client," Wolfe said, "which is not justice but advantage. Yet you did not instruct Miss Colby to steal. She acted independently." Colby's shoulders tensed. "He didn't tell me to take it." "No," Wolfe agreed. "You took it because you were one of the persons implicated in it." Her head jerked up. "That's not—" Wolfe's voice cut through gently. Ambrose Arden's memorandum was not a will. It was a list of leverage. Bribes, hidden ownership, arranged accidents, and 2 murders executed through intermediaries. It named names, dates, and amounts. In 2017, Mr. Arden used it to control his circle. If it surfaced now, it would not merely destabilize a hearing, it would destroy careers and invite prosecution. Colby stared at him like he'd read her diary. Wolfe went on, "You, Meredith Colby, were your father's daughter." Silence hit the room hard. Lila inhaled sharply. What? Reeves' head snapped toward Colby, stunned. Kramer's eyes narrowed like a man seeing a new street sign in a fog. Colby's face went rigid. That's a lie. It is an inference supported by your conduct, Wolfe said. Ambrose Arden had a long reputation for discreet liaisons. Your mother worked in his office in the late 1990s. You were born in 2001. Your education and employment were quietly financed by Arden trusts routed through legal intermediaries. Mr. Reeve knew this. That is why he hired you and why he trusted you too much. Reeve sputtered. I had no idea. Wolfe finally looked at him, and the look was not kind. You had every idea, Mr. Reeve. Your file contains a sealed paternity acknowledgement. Arden used you as a custodian of his private scaffolding. Miss Colby discovered that file last year. Therefore, she discovered she was not merely a clerk. She was a potential heir, a threat to Miss Arden's position, and a target of the memorandum. Colby's voice came out thin and furious. He never acknowledged me. He paid for me from a distance like a bribe. And the memo— Her eyes flashed to Lila and back. The memo called my mother a liability. It said I should be handled if I ever asked questions. Lila looked stricken, but anger was rising beneath it. You could have come to me. Colby let out a laugh without humor. You? The rightful daughter sitting on the estate while I was a ghost in his hallway. No, I didn't want your pity. I wanted the truth. And I wanted to survive what he'd written about me. Wolfe said quietly. So you stole the memorandum to read it, then to keep it from being used against you. And to keep it from being used against anyone else, she snapped, then faltered, catching herself. At first, yes. But then Varin came back. Varin contacted you, Wolfe said. She nodded once, brittle. He found me. He said he knew where the memo was. He said he'd sell it to the highest bidder unless I helped him. I didn't believe him until yesterday when I realized it was still in the file room. Reeve muttered, Jesus. Colby ignored him. I took it first. I hid it. I thought if I had it, I could negotiate with Varin, or with Reeve, or with someone. Then Varin went to Miss Arden's anyway. He thought she was the weak box. Wolfe's fingers made a small tent. He was not wrong about your fear of public notice, yet he miscalculated your reaction. You interrupted him. He left with the memorandum, believing you still had it. That forced your hand. Colby's eyes glossed. I followed him there. I waited on the street. I saw his lights. I couldn't let him walk out with it. If he sold it, I'd be dead or ruined. So I went in. Kramer leaned forward like a mastiff. How'd you get in? She swallowed. Miss Arden's father had given my mother a service key years ago. She kept it. I knew where. Lila stiffened but didn't speak. Colby continued, voice low. I found Varin in the guest room. He had the memo in his inside pocket. I begged him. He laughed. He said Arden's daughters were interchangeable. One legal, one secret. He said he'd sell me first. She closed her eyes. There was a carafe of water in the hall. I had cyanide. You had cyanide, Kramer repeated. She opened her eyes, defiant and wrecked. From a lab at the firm. We use it for some evidence kits. I took a tiny vial weeks ago when I started getting threats. I didn't know if I'd need it. I poured it into the water. I took the glass to him. He drank. He didn't taste it. Lila's hands went to her mouth. Reeve stared at Colby like she'd grown horns. Saul looked down, not shocked, just sorry in that professional way of his. Colby said, almost whispering now. He was dead within minutes. I took the memo back. I wiped the glass, the carafe, the hall. I went into the study to make sure Miss Arden didn't have a copy. I saw the drawer and I took a different folder by mistake at first. She shook her head, wild with the memory. I put it back. I left a warning for him, but too late. I left before she came down. I went straight to the file room to hide my trail. Then I stashed the memo. Kramer stood. You're under arrest for murder, theft, breaking and entering." Wolfe lifted a hand, forestalling the courtroom overture. "Inspector, you will of course do your duty, but consider motive. This was not murder for gain. It was murder to prevent murder." He turned to Colby, voice still cool. "You did not intend to kill until Varon demonstrated he would destroy you. You acted in panic, but with grim efficiency." Colby looked at him like she wanted to hate him, but couldn't muster the luxury. "What would you have done?" "I would have avoided the necessity," Wolfe said. "Yet necessity is sometimes the last refuge of those denied alternatives." Lila found her voice at last. It was quiet and raw. "You killed a man in my house." Colby flinched. "I know." Lila's chin lifted. "My father made you a shadow and made me a shield. He wrote his poison down and then died smiling, knowing it would keep us all dancing. I won't dance anymore." She looked at Wolfe. "If that memo is in the locker, I want it given to the police. All of it." Reeve protested. "Lila, that will destroy—" "It should," she said flatly. "If it's true." Wolfe nodded once, the satisfaction in him not about ruin, but about clarity. "A sound decision. It deprives your father of his final control." Kramer gestured to his men. "Take her. We'll get the memo." They got Colby up. She didn't fight. As she passed Lila, she paused. "I'm sorry," Colby said. "Not for him. For putting it in your house." Lila held her gaze. "I'm sorry for not knowing you existed." That was all. Then Colby was gone, footsteps fading down the hall like the end of a bad chapter. Reeve rose on shaky legs, already reaching for new angles. Kramer shut him down with a look. "Sit tight, counselor. We'll talk about obstruction later." Reeve sat like a man who'd just watched his career jump a fence. After they left, the brownstone quieted the way it always does after violence exits, reluctantly, with a mind still buzzing. Wolfe looked at Lila. "Miss Arden, the hearing in 2 weeks will now be irrelevant. Your father's estate will be swallowed by criminal inquiry." "I know," she said. Her voice was steadier now. "But there's something cleaner in that than winning on a lie." Wolfe's mouth twitched, not a smile, but a recognition. "You owe no more debts to the dead." She rose, smoothing her skirt. "Thank you, Mr. Wolfe. Truly." "You may thank Mr. Goodwin," Wolfe said. "He encountered your disturbance without betraying your interests, which is rare." I gave her a small salute. I try not to betray before lunch. She almost laughed. Then Fritz appeared in the doorway with that expression that means he has been patient longer than a saint. "Dinner is served," he announced with gentle tyranny. Wolfe's eyes went to Fritz like a compass swinging back to north. Then, because he is Wolfe, he added one last thing to the room. "Archie," he said as we rose, "observe. Ambrose Arden believed he could secure his legacy by blackmailing the future. He succeeded for a while. But blackmail is merely deferred chaos. One cannot purchase immortality with other people's fear." I nodded. "Is that the philosophical closure, or are you just hungry?" "Yes," he said. At the table, with the soup steaming and the house settling back into its old comfort, I thought about Simon Varon lying in a guest room, about Meredith Colby walking out in handcuffs, about Lila Arden choosing a fire over a cage. The brownstone had been disturbed, and it would be disturbed again someday, because human beings can't help ringing bells at the wrong hour. But for tonight, Wolfe had his chair, Fritz had his basil, and I had my quip, which is about as close to justice as you get in New York before dessert.